Today, I would like to talk about how Western psychology has been criticized from the point of view critical psychology. Uh, Western psychology has some basic assumption about man, about human individual, and the world. The fundamental assumption of Western psychology is Western psychology is purely scientific psychology. It is value free, it is philosophy free, it is theology free. So it is pure scientific facts. This is the basic assumption of Western psychology. Uh, Claiming being purely scientific, value free science, Western psychological tradition also claims that Western psychology is universal psychology, universal science. So that is the point where critical psychology criticize Western psychological tradition. Critical psychology say that look, in this way psychology just make Western understanding as universal, but it makes no Western understanding of human individual and the world very marginal. So marginalization, no Western views. In one side, the universalization of Western psychological side is on the other side. So that is where both approaches clashes and conflict with each other. Uh, as I said at the beginning, the fundamental idea of Western psychology is value free, being value free, and being worldview free. Western psychology reject philosophy. It cut its ties with philosophy entirely. It said, I have nothing to deal with philosophy. But on the other hand, critical psychology said that we have to take account people's languages, people's philosophies, people's values, and people's world views. Because people, through these values, through these philosophies, through these worldviews, they make they make sense of themselves and sense of the world. Through philosophy, values, and worldviews, people reach a meaningful framework about human existence and uh, the world. But psychology simply say yes, modern psychology or scientific psychology say that people's value, people's worldviews, philosophy simply irrelevant. I am not interested in them. So critical psychology somehow, it is obvious that Western scientific tradition or Western scientific psychology has an exclusionary aspects dimension. But critical psychology tries to develop more inclusive, more pluralistic approach to psychology. It's said that modern scientific psychology just universalize Western psychology and marginalize the rest. Critical psychology in this regard is making a very important claims. It said that no one, no society, no culture, no tradition should be marginalized by psychology. So there is no marginal in psychology. This is a very important idea in which critical psychology is promoting. Uh, yes, it is obvious that there is a big clash and conflict between these two critical approaches and Western approaches. Critical psychology recognized that modern psychology is not a universal psychology. Critical psychology constantly contests the universality of Western psychological approach. It said that modern psychology, uh, what we know as modern psychology, is not a universal psychology. It is just a Western production. It is a production of North America and largely Western Europe. Uh, the rest of the world transferred uh, Western psychological knowledge through technology. And these Western psychological discipline um, has been constructed like natural science in order to be uh, empirical science. The model of psychology is physics, biology. So, therefore, psychology claims to be a value free science like physics, like biology, and so on. And uh, Western psychology, when it examines, for example, the psychological processes such as motivation, perception, emotion, and so on, uh, they try to construct approaches in a universalist way. They say our explanation about emotion, about perception, about motivation, they are simply universal. So, because uh, they think that the structure behind these psychological processes, they are hidden inside human individual, inside human biology, inside human neurology. They don't pay, Western psychological tradition don't pay too much attention, for example, culture. Don't pay too much attention values of this society or worldviews of this society or beliefs of these societies because they think that culture, values, philosophies, beliefs, they are uh, superficial uh, differences. We have to get rid of these superficial differences in order to reach true scientific universal understanding of psychological processes. So, uh, this psychological approach or method or theories which have been developed in the West have been replicated in the rest of the world. These methods, this approach, this way of understanding of psychology followed in Africa, in Asia, in China, uh, in, in Middle East, without, I mean, that is an important area where critical psychology is objecting. It said, look, what you developed in the West cannot be valid in everywhere. What, what is valid in Germany cannot be valid, let's say, in South Africa. So, critical psychology is objecting the blind imitation and the application Western psychological approaches, and methods in every part of the world. And critical psychology, as I said before, consider Western psychology Western psychology, or sorry, modern psychology as Western product. And it said that West imposes its psychological understanding from top to down all the rest of the world. So, imposing Western psychology in every part of the world viewed as as a form of cultural colonization by critical psychology. For example, they say, Western psychology, modern psychology, invented and produced many tests, many psychological tests. And this test applied in every part of the world. And so, but people in other part of the world, they are just passive recipient or passive receiver or consumers of Western psychology. So the methods, the tests have been developed in the West don't meet the need of no Western peoples. For example, the urgent needs of no Western peoples are illiteracy. How can they eliminate illiteracy? How can they eliminate poverty? Practically, Western psychology doesn't say anything about all these practical problems of no Western world. So that's a very important criticism of critical psychology to modern psychology. So, critical psychology, by viewing modern psychology as a form of cultural colonization, that means that critical psychology don't see modern psychology as just scientific psychology, as just scientific discipline. These critics of critical psychology implies that modern psychology is not a scientific discipline, but it works and functions as psychological industry. So the point is here, I think, critical psychology is making a very important criticism of modern psychology. Critical psychology criticizes modern psychology when it turns into the form of psychological industry. Uh, uh, of course, critical psychology directed its criticism to the heart of Western psychological tradition. The main the, the main target for critical psychology is the perception of self in modern psychology. Uh, critical, from the point of view critical psychology, it said that Western understanding of psychology makes uh, a differentiation between human self and knowledge. Uh, Human self, according to Western understanding, uh, they are divorced from their cultural background, from their gender background, from their uh, existential position in the contextual background, and so on. I mean, it is just they they have a sort of abstract perception of human selves. These abstracted human selves has perception, motivation, feelings, and so on. And all his perceptions, emotions, and feelings, they are independent from social and contextual factors. So when uh, people meet or face culture, society, religion, or what gender, or whatever, people are just making their own choices. That is the perception of Western way of looking human self. So this self-contained individualism Western way of Western idea of self-contained individualism has been criticized by critical psychology. Critical psychology said that, well, wait a minute. Simply, this understanding of human self does not exist in every culture, does not exist in no Western societies. In no Western societies, understanding of human selves depends on the context. For example, your way of relationship with your family, with community, with the group determines the way you understand yourself. So people socialize with other people not in order to be an autonomous, isolated individual, but they socialize in order to be a part of society or in order to be a part of community. So uh, uh, this way of looking individual from the perspective of critical psychology, it is a collectivist self, or they say it is interdependent self. So it is Western way of looking individual, it is a sort of self-contained individualism, but critical psychology said that in other cultures, in indigenous societies and cultures, the approach to human self is not self-contained. It is not an independent view of the self. It is a sort of collectivist self and interdependent self. So, uh, of course, uh, critical psychology, as we see, it is a sort of radical way of criticism of modern psychology. It criticizes or it challenges the universality of modern psychology. It challenged the scientific validity of psychology. It challenged and criticized the way how modern psychology look at the self. So I think this brings us a very important conclusion that critical psychology show us the way to look at human being not through Western lenses, and it said to us it is possible to look at human individual from no Western perspectives. So critical psychology tries to make the area of psychology more open, more inclusive, and more pluralistic. That's all for today. Thank you.